together. We're recording this message to make sure that those who are not able to be in the room are able to still benefit from what's going to take place once things start moving forward. And sometimes we get technological issues at the beginning of things, and so it's a great opportunity. If anyone has anything you want to share, we can be chatting in the comments section throughout. You're also welcome to put up your hand or raise hand under the reactions feature there. So that'll just make it, if we do get more people coming in because of the nature of this call, then we can make sure that your screen is in the view for the recording. And I always do say, because there is an added element of the way that we play in these meetings, and that's the fact that this is also about redesigning and reimagining our own self-image. So I just offer to you who are in view now and who watch the replay later, that basically when we show up to these meetings, what if we showed up to these meetings the way that we wish to be seen in the world? Not from an external perspective and it only just being about the way that we're seen and perceived, but energetically, what if we really start thinking about all of the elements that we're bringing to the screen when we show up? So I just like to bring in that element. And John, it's great to have you joining in as well. Welcome in. Beautiful. Ethan, as you are here, and we are talking about the alphabet, I wonder if you might want to just share a perspective of the story of the alphabet as to how it connects to your track of expertise, which is really unpacking the Bible from an uncommon way. Maybe if you could give yourself and give an introduction to yourself to all of those who are new to you, I think that would be a great opportunity.
Yeah, I can do that. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're perfect.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and honestly, I was actually, and I kind of wish Dan was on here right now, just because I kind of wanted to preface something with him, because you know I've watched a lot of Dan's stuff in the past, and I agree with a lot of what he says, but there's stuff that I disagree with too, and there's a reason why, and it's not disrespectfully, but I think he and I are going to disagree for different reasons on certain things, and that's not a bad thing either, because when you have two opposing forces, that's called the Hegelian dialectic. That's what drives things forward. Kind of like the pedals on a bicycle. If they were both in the same position, you couldn't pedal the bicycle. They have to be in opposition to each other so they can move the thing forward. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just going to preface it right there. I don't want Dan to take offense to anything I say, because anyone who's watched my show, the Ethan Lucas Show, on my website, ethanlucas.com, which is the only place that exists now in the private, because I've taken it completely out of the public. Or if you've watched me on Rice TVX, a lot of people watch me on there as well. You know that I do not subscribe one iota to any bit of traditional Christianity. And it's interesting too, because actually, if you look at the etymology of the word tradition, someone who is traditional is one who actually gives over to or passes on or gives away their authority or power. So that's not by accident or coincidence either. That's part of that whole alphabet thing that we're talking about. And there's a reason they've steered everybody into traditional thought forms, which are thought forms giving away your power.
Dan, the Christian Dan, is in the house.
Yeah, I think so.
Hey, that we can hear you. Can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Can you see me?
No.
Oh, no, that's not good. Well, that may be good. Some people would actually think that's good. Hold on a second here. Depending on what government official you talk to.
It's actually, it's perfect I'll let you know when we can see you, Dan. But Ethan Lucas was actually speaking into the roots of tradition and a genealogical connection with that, and differing BS or belief systems. And
Can you see me?
no, we
Am
cannot.
I still not in? Okay. Oh, hold on. Oh, there, I got it.
And your audio is very, very loud, Dan. You're like distorting and it's very loud.
Oh, that's really bad. Okay, so we got to do something about that. Oh.
From my end, I can hear you.
Okay, how am I now?
And
It's
I
the
think
same.
it's great.
Is it better?
You're still very loud, but it's better than you being quiet.
Yeah.
Everything's relative, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, yeah. Okay, perfect. We can see you. You got some shadow on the board, but we're also going to be exposing shadow and talking a lot about a lot of different things. So I'm excited to see where it goes. Right before you got back in here, Dan the Christian Man, Ethan Lucas was actually, I wanted to give him an opportunity to introduce himself as well, because I do feel like together you're going to have a very interesting perspective that can help fill in some gaps.
Sure.
And Ethan was actually just saying that, like others on the call, he may or may not agree with all of what is shared. But the beautiful thing about this being a summit experience is that we have the opportunity to bring up or address any misunderstandings or competing ideas or belief systems that interfere with our ability to come to an ultimate decision around our way of believing or feeling into something, and then we can see how it fits and fits. So you got some spurious light, which is a good thing in that moment, which is very symbolic too. So I just wanted to put that forward and say that we don't expect everyone to agree with everything, but we do expect respect to be in the space. So that's ultimately how we're going to play this game. And so it's no shame. It's just an opportunity to express and share uncommon wisdom and insights. Please use the chat box, anybody that wants to banter or go deeper, and we can bring that into the conversation. I'm gonna throw it over to you, Dan the Christian Man, first.
Okay. As far as it goes, what we're dealing with language is a big problem because we're dealing in speaking a language that people have taken for granted. What they're saying means what it means, and it's an issue if you're not understanding the letters, because letters in a language are a message. So if I send Laura a message, I send her a letter. And so if I don't understand what the letters mean, the whole diving into language becomes quite complex. I think the biggest problem with the English language is because it borrows from so many different languages, that it being a debtor's language just in the essence of that it's a borrower language. It's a Babylonian language. It is the whole complex of something from an event that led to the separation of languages into what we see today. And so, you know, what's interesting, there'll be people who say, I don't believe the Bible, I'm not going to go down that. They're going to say that, you know, the Bible is just some, you know, weird out book that someone constructed and put together, but that's generally because they haven't researched the codes in the book to realize that if they said that, they would look like an idiot, because the format of the codes in the book actually support the fact that it's miraculous. You can't actually answer standard questions on how certain things came about. So the problem with the internet, the World Wide Web, so to speak, is full of entanglements of mis and disinformation. And so people watch a 1 hour video and they go, after I watch that 1 hour video, now I don't believe in God. There's no creator. someone told me that it's all made up and I'm being controlled by the Catholic Church and that's what it's all about. But that's a superficial, so lame, position, because they just don't want to own up to moral code or being a good individual, that they're going to go, oh, I'm going to blame everything to do with religion and moral goodness on the Catholic Church for what they've done. We're going to blame it on what they did with the native people. So that's what we're going to go with. And I said, that's not nothing to do. Why would anybody believe in the Roman Catholic Church is more the question for me, because it has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. So it's nothing more than a mutated takeover of it, but people will go down that direction just on that alone. So when we're dealing with the World Wide Web, we have to understand, where did you get your information from? Where did you get the research that went into the language? Were you really going to dictionaries? Were you actually going to the diction where it began? Were you actually researching to the level where it is? And then were you realizing that they must have used something far beyond that? So when we're looking at letters, the letters being a message, we have to look at that. I have a cat in the background. Sorry about that. We're having a little bit of distractions here. But anyways, the letters are extremely important. So what can I possibly stress beyond the letters? If I don't know what the letters mean, then I'm not going to know what a word means. And that's what we talked about in that first, kind of interaction we did on the alphabet, because we're dealing with, basically a code that occurs in a letter alphabet. And even when we use the term alphabet, we're mainly talking about the Greek language. Alpha and beta do not come from Hebrew. They don't come from Latin. They come from actually the Greek language. So we really shouldn't probably be using the term alphabet when describing the hieroglyphs of each individual ancient language. And when we deal with the Hebrew language, we're dealing with, in ancient Hebrew, it's considered to be a pure language. So it's pure. So when you know what the hieroglyph means, and hieroglyph, so we'll just deal with that. Hopefully this shows up on the screen. I'll write in red.
I don't know how well that's...
Is that showing up?
Maybe if it was closer, but you got quite the gleam going on.
How's that?
Probably as good as it's going to get. We can...
Hold on.
A bit.
I'm going to try to... Try the lighting. I'm not going to be able to do too much on this. But higher...
Capitalized on...
How's that?
We can't see your head, so you're capitalized.
Oh, no, I'm gone. Oh, I've been decapitated. Okay. How's that?
Air. We can see air.
Okay, so when we're looking at this higher, that means sacred. Okay, so we dealt with that in our previous, sacred. And then when we're dealing with glyph, we're talking about the actual language or the code that's involved. So it's like sacred code. And if I'm not understanding that, the hierarchy understand this, that control the use of that language. So even the English language has a hierarchy who understands the letters they're using when they write something.
I hadn't ever made the connection with hierarchy with hierarchies.
And it's the same thing. They're all in the same code. So when you look at the etymology of those words, or those these key parts, they're so important, because if I don't comprehend where this is going to the root of where it is, then I'm not going to be able to explain to people how to understand the letters of the messages out of each letter. So the biggest problem with what we call the public education system, and what we saw in a previous interaction we had, where someone was quite upset that I was comparing Job with Job, they weren't understanding that I was talking about the English comparison of Job in the English language matching the test of Job which by chance translated into English out of the Hebrew turns out to spell job, which is official public business for private dishonest gain. So I didn't come up with the definitions of these words, but the lack of the knowledge from someone who jumps into the middle, which we call that the middle of the pool. So it's like somebody jumping into the middle of a subject matter, and they have no basis where they began, and then they have no basis how they got there. And then they jump into the middle of it, and then they're trying to argue a point, and it becomes very confusing, which is understandable because of the fact that they've actually leaped into the middle without knowing how they got there. So they're diving into law, and I'm not going to get into the gurus that are on the internet on now the legal subjects interviewed on various sites, but these are people who have jumped into the middle of the law. They grab a word and they go, it's all there. See, if you understand that one word, you know everything. And I'm going, that's not accurate. I'm going to back off. It looks like I'm still cut off.
Your head, we're not able to see your head. So.
Well, I'm going to, okay, well, at least until I get killed, at least you'll see me in the meantime before I become beheaded in this. So, so basically we need to understand that if we don't understand the letters, we're wasting our time in the debate of the language. So if I wanted to shut down anything, whether it be a courtroom, even the court civil system has an interpretation act. And they said, if you're using a certain word that we're using in the processing of what they're doing with you at that moment, they'll say there's an interpretation act that says what that word means. Every word that they're using. Now, I would have to say that it's pretty sloppy in there. So I'd say that the average judge is not knowing every word that he's using in that interpretation act when he's ruling on something. And you,
hey Dan, can I interject something there just for a minute? I'm
sure.
Sorry. Here's what I've found, because I've gone through the whole thing with hardcore redemption and law, all of it. I mean, I've studied inside out, upside down, right side, left side, every which way you can think of. I've seen everybody's version of it, I think, so far. And here's what I finally deciphered. It finally hit me. And I feel like it's something the Holy Spirit just gave me was, and this is great to learn this, okay? And that's why we're here. And I think it's important to learn, because once you learn it, that's how you really see it, and you can't unsee it. That's what really gets it ingrained in people to understand or overstand, understand, comprehend, whatever you want to say, because you know as well as I do, when you say you understand, you're putting yourself under that authority in the eyes of the court. But here's my point. Why are we playing their game? Because ultimately it's not up to them. And they only have power and authority over us if we give it to them. So what I finally realized was, especially when I learned how to properly write affidavits, and I learned the power of an affidavit, I've used it many times now very successfully. When you go into a court, you establish the ground rules before the game even starts, because if you don't, they're going to automatically assume that you're playing by their rules and you're speaking their language. So what I've found is, because I got tired of playing the game, learning all the subtle little nuances, and if I slip up one tiny little thing here, they got me. I'm tired of playing the immature gotcha game of Babylon. Okay, so what I do is, when I go in, I walk in with an affidavit up front and say, I'm not playing your game with spells and word magic. I completely comprehend it. And the fact that I have this affidavit that literally spells that out shows that I fully comprehend it. And I don't understand it because it doesn't actually say anything. It's all gibberish and BS. So what I've done is I've created an affidavit. If I have to go into court, they play by my rules. They speak my language. I don't understand their language. I don't speak their language. And even in international law, no matter where you're at, if you don't understand the language being spoken, you cannot be held accountable. So I just flip it around and I'm saying, I'm not going to play your stupid game. You're going to use common sense. And if I say understand, I'm not doing some little sleazy thing that I'm ignorant of, that, you know, you're just the whole gotcha thing. And that's not going to fly. If I say understand, I'm saying it as a normal, natural man who uses that verbiage in the way that all of us comprehend that word. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I found that just puts a stopper to the whole thing anyway. Now, that doesn't mean don't study this stuff and don't talk about it, because
yeah, totally. I'm with you on that, because
but that's what I do. So I wanted to put that out there before we go into all of this, because that's my stance on it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that, because it's not necessary to do this. I don't do that on my videos. If anybody's ever watched the videos I put up on YouTube, I don't upload the letter sequence, understanding alphabet research, mainly because it's not necessary, even though it has a lot to do with understanding what could happen and why things are the way they are, and to let people know that there are spells going on and they're going to be cast on them.
Right.
But in reality, when you see the simplicity of anything that's been cast on anybody, I don't care if I received a birth certificate, it doesn't have my signature on it, it doesn't have my seal on it.
Exactly.
It's somebody else's seal. So the biggest problem what's happened is people have used those certificates and then become surety for them, and ended up with a picture, a driver's license, things that have nothing to do with the original certificate issued.
Right.
And then you end up doing something as a derivative of it that would literally, if anything, imply the fact they've actually taken over a signing authority for that certificate. So in other words, no matter what it may have, why would they take that position when someone's issued me something in a legal system and says, this is how it is? Well, then you have the authority of their seal right there, because that seal is the signature for whatever's on that certificate. We've been duped into believing that we are the certificate.
Right.
And then we start to go down past trying to defend it.
Or that these frivolous laws that they've made up actually apply to us. And the only way they can apply to us is if now obviously natural law still applies to us. You can't go out and kill somebody. You can't rape. You can't steal, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Okay. So those things you still are held accountable for. However, all of the other frivolous laws they've made up in their legal fiction, the only way they can get you to pay for those is to get you to attach yourself to the legal fiction system. And that's what you're saying. This is how they do it. All I'm saying is that's a spell. And how many people know that you're talking about spells? There's also counter spells. I'm walking in the front door, bigger than shit, pardon my French, with the biggest counter spell you've ever seen before the game even starts. And it puts an end to it right there.
Well, put it this way. You look at it that the docket, and that's one of the key things. The court starts off with a docket, and the docket is based on a spell that's already in place, already based on an issuance of a certificate. What the child has nothing to do with it. It's when we start to get involved, starting to do things with things. In fact, you can't even enact anything in their world without the idea of consent and age of election. So everything kind of changes at 18 anyway. So whatever is coming into place, even though some of the things are initiated prior even to that age, the key thing is that the security instruments you use have somebody else sponsoring and signing for and guaranteeing everything. So when we decided to say, I don't want you sponsoring this anymore, I'm going to start doing this myself.
Yeah, and that's known as a unilateral contract. And a unilateral contract, once somebody says, I don't want to be part of this, when you don't consent anymore to the unilateral contract, it goes away automatically.
And basically, as far as I'm concerned, everything in the legal is basically a fiction to begin with. So let the fictionists pay for their own fiction. So let them, basically.
Well, that's why Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead.
Exactly. So their corporate signatories are it. And when you're dealing with who you really are and what really is the interaction between the state and what is considered to be, if we want to use the word private, that does not belong to them. It's something that, it's not even ours, it's something that comes from the Creator. So our Creator basically has a jurisdiction on its own. So God doesn't give you the ability to be a creator. You are basically the creation. And in the legal, the same format follows. There's recreation, which is what goes on in fiction. It's recreation, it's entertainment. And the entertainment, gurus, so to speak, that basically are in control of that, they're the signing for their own fiction. So the mixture of the two together, the truth and the fiction, is the problem, and it should never be even in the same place. But even if they wanted to do that, they're caught against the wall anyways with their own signature. So
that's that creation,
is already there.
That legal fiction straw man, that becomes that creation is a creature. That's where the word creature comes from, is creation. It's a man-made thing. A creature is also known as a monster. And I know I'm not telling you things you don't know. I know you already know this. I'm just saying it for the sake of this discussion for other people. But a monster by definition is a malformed animal or human creature afflicted with a birth defect. Okay. And what's interesting when you look at that, so you become the creature, that straw man is a creature, it's something with a birth defect. Well, the birth defect is the fact that they've created a legal fiction around your birth that's not even you. In fact, I've even heard some people, and it sounds, does it really matter if this is actually what it is or not? I don't think so, because we all know what they're doing. But I've even heard some say, because they have to attach that to something, they have to legally attach that spell to something that is once alive. They attach it to the afterbirth. The afterbirth then dies. So then you're identifying, they two go two different ways. It's like Jacob and Esau. Jacob was the living man, the living soul. Esau sold his birthright. He became the debtor. He was dead. He lost his inheritance. So it's almost like that story symbolically is telling us about Jacob and Esau. It's the living man or woman and the afterbirth. And they assign identities to both of them. One is the creature of God, the creation of God. And 1 Timothy 4:4 says every creature of God is good. But we know that not every creature of man is good. So they've used all of that stuff that I just mentioned and this interesting combobulation of everything you talk about and everything I always talk about on my podcast to create this whole thing. So that was just like an interesting tidbit I want to throw in there, because you started talking about creations, because etymologically we're talking about the alphabet here. That's how that word spell works, and that's where that came from. The creature, the creation. The creature is the monster, which is a birth defect, which is where all this comes from.
They've got the legal mixed in with what is natural. Yeah. And legal and natural don't go together, even in their own definition of what is legal and natural. So there's a separation. So when you merge those two together, you run into the problem. The confusion with the majority of the audience that'll be out there. I don't know how many people are listening in on our little cast tonight, like what we're talking about. But all I can say is that the majority of people that are out there, as you would know, that are out there with probably sites, come to me, I'm going to go and show you what, how to do this, that, and the other thing in the legal world. They don't even understand the difference, because they're still using the two things merged together.
Right.
And when you use something that is on the Caesar side, which is the fictitious side, because the Romans and the civil society were based on the whole concept of fiction, the body corporate, the dead body, and that it would continue to it would go on and on and on in perpetuity after the death of the individual, passed on to the next carrier. That's how they ran the spirit of their system. Whereas the natural system understood that it ended. At least it ended in a sense under what we know from the Bible. It ended. It's not to say that man's spirit ended, but it's not in the sense of how the legal system operates. They're believing there's a ghost. That's why they use terms like ghost in the King James versus spirit, which was the nephesh, translated out of Greek. They were using a term that was dealing with something kind of very dark and evil, and it would just continue on. So this evil spirit would continue on to the next party who would pick up that spell and carry it on. And that's how the name and arms clause went on in Roman civil society, so that you could not inherit unless you would pick up the inheritance through the will of the last testator, who said, if you want to grab this estate, you have to sign for it, and that's how it's going to continue. But I mean, you're going to outwit the game on this always when you realize that the certificates that are issued anyways already have a signing authority, because they're using the jus soli, citizenship by birth. They're using the idea of the Catholic baptism, which is you were born or baptized into the civil system, which is why the Catholic Church adopted child baptism. It was to reflect the Roman citizenship idea that you were deemed to be a Roman citizen by birth. So,
Oh, Dan has frozen.
Uh-oh.
Well, he will come back. One of the things I was going to mention while he was talking about laws, and the fact that space is God's territory, which is why it is the court of law, not the court of laws, because law, the S of law is space, whereas the L is land, the A is air, and the
the only thing that's duped most people is the fact that they've signed for things.
Hey, Dan, we actually lost you for about a minute there.
Oh, okay. I don't know where it was. So I was saying that on the birth record system, it reflects the Catholic Church baptism of a child. So nobody's born a citizen, nor is anybody born a Roman Catholic, convert. And so they did the water baptism by putting a watermark on most of the birth records that parents filled out, and then they issued a certificate of that. And that was actually the sponsors. So the sponsors, if we look up sponsor, they're the ones who sponsor the legal faith, not the spiritual. So because the Roman system is about money, it's not about something natural. It has nothing to do with God. Money doesn't grow on trees. So the legal sponsors are responsible. So simply enough, they had to take responsibility for their position on that, to run that. So the option is someone going to actually run a spiritual life? Are they going to wake up and see it? Or are they going to leave the state to look after what the state is? Let the dead bury the dead. So the seal is there, okay, under these vital statistics acts as a relief for someone who is not going to play the game. And therefore, as much as I want to play inside the court, I'd never be brought in there, because the very fact is there'd be nothing to go forward with in there, because there's nothing I'm doing that's attaching to the money, because I believe the money is theirs, and let them have it all, and let them play it, and let them pay for it.
Well, the fiat currency.
I'm going to go and sign my name on something or attach myself anywhere in there. I've broken myself into the protection that's already there.
Right. Well, I think the biggest problem that most people face, though, is this mark of the beast system they've created. Is it's so widespread, it's damn near impossible to even live life. Just like John the Revelator said, you won't be able to buy or sell without it. And here we are. It's not that you can't, it's that it's super difficult to. And so I think in a lot of ways, and this is probably where you and I would disagree, because I don't believe the Bible instructs me to live in lack or in poverty or without anything but abundance. And I'm not going to argue with you about that, because I know you and I differ on that. So to even enter into that argument, it's going to be counterproductive. We'll just have to agree to disagree on that. But my point is, how does somebody, I mean, that's just a good point to bring up. How does somebody operate? I mean, I know how I do. I've taken the position of the administrator and the beneficiary, and I turn them into the trustee because they're the ones that have foisted this system on us. They've given us no choice but to use it unless you want to live in the woods, like a caveman, essentially, or maybe like the Amish. I don't know. Maybe the Amish had it right the whole time. But, unless you do something like that, you really can't participate in society or in life at all. So what I've done is I just say, okay, this is yours. You created it. I am rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but that doesn't mean I'm relinquishing control, because Christ has conquered the whole world and I am in Christ. Christ is in me. So that means I have power and authority over their system. They work for me now. And so that's how I utilize it.
Okay. So always saying back to that very thing you're talking about, that's why they have their seal and their signature written in the Vital Statistics Act.
Yeah.
As the authority of anybody that's in there. They never told anybody they had to sign. We misread because we followed the majority of the masses to sign for the debt. So no one put a gun to anybody's head to sign for anything as a surety. So there's no fight going on. The certificate is the judgment in favor of them operating and taking the responsibility for their own legal debt. And the only way you're going to do that is with their ordained seal and authority. That's why all the registrar general's seals come under the Great Seal, which is the highest authority of that legal realm to look after legal debt. So there is no such thing as legal debt that I'd be fighting against in spirituality anyways. So why wouldn't I just use their signature and seal?
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like there's no point me running into a court arguing with them over a fee, a fine, or anything. They're not only is the name on the docket on a certificate that has their signature and seal, so it's already there, and that bond never entered into the court with someone walking in there and saying, "I'm this." They just took.
Well, I don't walk in and say I'm this. I walk in on special appearance only as the administrator and beneficiary of the estate. And I make them the trustee.
Wouldn't it be easier just to say you're not in charge and here I've got the certificate of who's in charge?
I mean, that's essentially what I do. Yeah. I mean, the beneficiary is not in charge. The administrator is, but I mean, I think you can take the position of just the beneficiary if you want.
I just look at it that I'm not in charge of something that's legal anyways. It was something was done without my consent anyway. So it means nothing for me. I haven't done anything. So just take it from day one, whatever they've issued out of there, it's their signature, suretyship, and seal on it. It has nothing to do with us. Everything we've done is a derivative of that. That's why they take your picture. That's why they want your consent and signature on all those other things. And those are from departments of the government that actually have no authorization from the registrar of the birth to actually even use those certificates to actually those.
But you and I know that the law enforcement officers have not, well, I wouldn't say they have not been made aware of this. They've been specifically trained in the opposite of this, and they don't give a damn about truth or the real law, and they become violent.
They must accept that even on the Highway Traffic Act, just as far as on a Canadian level, the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, the last thing that's required by anybody at the worst end is to surrender to the officer government issued ID. It doesn't mean the fact that the guy who's being surrendered it to understands it. It's not for me to do that. But if I gave him in peace the very thing that was issued to me, then that's all I have to give him. The driver's license doesn't say given name or surname. So if you're in the United States, where does a driver's license ever say given name or surname on it?
Well, the surname is on it, but
no,
I think one of the solutions to that, because they've
driver's license in no state or province, whether it's provincial or in the United States of America, has given name or surname on a driver's license. It just says name.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So where do separate in some states they do separate out the surname from the given.
Well, that's a department that is using the certificate. That's not the department where it originated from, but they've got someone to consent to enter into that department and to sign. I understand why they would do that. That's that's basically the whole trafficking or taking over the name, and I would want someone's picture and signature if someone was trespassing on me.
Yeah. But
Why-
you know,
why would
and you've said it before, that's how
illegal.
they get you with in-cameration, which in-cameration was the seizing of assets by the Vatican, essentially.
Well, I just think an in-camera is private. So you've
But what
consented.
I'm saying, when they put your picture on the driver license, that's what they're doing.
Right. But remember, there's no connection at all from the actual certificate on its own to the driver's license. The reason it's used as a derivative of that is based on the consent of the party to enter into the Department of Transportation in each province or state to do that, and then they give their picture. Now, if the first instrument's no good, nothing down below it could be any good. So why would I surrender anything else to an officer? And that's why the Highway Traffic Acts only require someone to surrender that birth certificate. At the worst end, if you have nothing else, they say surrender the birth certificate.
I got you. Well, actually, technically, I think, at least in all the states I've lived in the US, you're not actually required to carry your driver, even according to their laws. You're not required to actually carry that driver license with you. They just say you have to be in possession of one. It doesn't necessarily have to be on your person at the time of a traffic stop, but you have to be, according to them, you have to be in possession of one. And I know people who, just out of convenience, who don't want any scuffles with law enforcement, who don't give a damn about your rights, and most of them don't. They've gone by the way of creating affidavits with basically having a little packet. If they get pulled over, they do have the driver license, but they've stamped the word beneficiary over their picture. So there's no question that I am not that legal fiction. That picture that's on there, that's a picture of the beneficiary of the estate. So it creates that definitive separation. Now, again, you know, judges aren't going to give a damn about that. Law enforcement doesn't, but it at least gives you that, if you feel that's the route you want to take, to create that separation. And if they don't rebut the affidavit, it stands as truth anyway. So
how could they rebut the certificate with their own signing authority on it? So then I wouldn't be in charge. Anybody who signs on the bottom is the actual underwriter and the signing authority. So why ruin a good thing?
Right, I get that. But let me ask you this: when I'm assuming you drive automobiles, so at least some.
Well, I operate them. I'm not going to get into that driver thing because that's the product.
No, I know. I'm not. Again, when I talk,
Your drive.
when I talk, I'm not playing their word stuff. I don't do it. So if I say drive, it's what you and I, as a common, natural living.
I don't. I'm uncommon, not common. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get into that verbatim. Spells can actually.
Well, even when I say, but that's an example right there. I say a common man, and you say, no, I'm uncommon. I'm not playing that game. I'm not getting trapped in any of the game. I understand it exists. I don't understand that. When I'm speaking, I'm trying to convey what's normally said.
Wouldn't it be more simpler to say, this is what your superior has given me to give to you? And that's the end of it. You say no more. Why do you want to get into debates on having to create an affidavit when you would just hand them the very thing that they'll be witnessing for you in the court of law? Because you said, I was given this to give to you. Your superiors gave me this. General outranks any officer on the road.
Is that how you handle it? So you drive with that driver license?
You do. Absolutely.
Or you have whatever you want to call it.
And I have no legal rights. Why would I want legal rights?
No, you don't.
So it's only assumed, but all those legal rights are contained inside that document anyways with someone else's signing authority. So the whole thought pattern.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just asking for your perspective on it and telling
My
me.
perspective would be to hand them the instrument that they issue in peace and say, what, if this is no good, nothing down below it could be any good, because you don't get a driver's license without a birth certificate. So why would I go to the next department, hand them something, and then take my picture and then put my signature down? I just took them off the bond.
So you don't have a signature on your driver license?
I don't even have a driver's. I haven't had one. I've had nothing.
That's what I was asking.
About since 2006.
Okay. So how do you handle traffic stops then?
I don't get them, surprisingly. I don't get them. But when I did have them, that's all I ever handed them. And they have to accept those documents because it's absolutely their how'd you say, obligation to accept those original certificates.
So you're saying you just hand them a birth certificate?
I would hand them basically the birth documents. And at the worst end, I would hand them the one that the parents filled out at the hospital, which is definitely beyond anything that I could have possibly been involved in.
Sure.
And you know, uniquely enough, you're not on the birth certificate. You're not the signing authority on that. So you've got ordained authorities that have signed for that's the version of the name that will show up on the docket. So if that certificate's no good, I'd just be sitting beside the prosecutor and saying, hey, what are we getting this guy for?
Right.
Because
I see your approach. I was just asking how you handle it.
But you have to, I mean, you're in a very corrupt world. There's no doubt about it. And you're going to be challenged. But most of the movement that's out there with most of the groups, they're for saying my picture is going to be on there. I'm just being done in. I have every right to the money, and you don't have any right to the money. The money's artificial. It has nothing to do with natural or anything. There's no money growing on trees. Squirrels don't rent out trees to other squirrels. And if they did, the squirrel on the other tree, having the other squirrel try to rent out a tree to them, would say you're nuts. So completely insane. There's no valid background to say I'm being ripped off on my energies on money, because money is not something that's spiritual. And that's why it said you cannot serve God and mammon. That came right out of Christ. So it's an impossible. Cannot means impossible. So it's a two-master situation that's going on, and most people are fighting after the money because they think they've been ripped off the money.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, but I don't serve money and I don't serve mammon, but they are. And I think you'll disagree with me, but I don't believe that mammon is the same thing as money. Mammon is the Babylonian spirit of greed and avarice. Money itself is just like a gun. It's a tool. It's not good or evil. It can be used for good or evil. But I don't serve money. Money serves me. And so that's why I'm saying that's the stance that I take on it.
I do believe that where the driving.
There's no way you can use money for it, because there's never been a historical record. Please show me one historical record, brother. I'm with you, but please show me one historical record where money was ever used for good. I just don't see it. Where's that ever happened in the historical record of the nations that we're dealing with? Where have you ever seen money ever used for anything other than?
We're having
when you're using someone else's currency that's issued, I could be one little drop in the bucket. It's like me working for Acme International that produces pencils. And so if everybody from Acme International that works there as an employee takes home the pencils, okay, there'd be no pencils. And so I may be the guy who doesn't take home the pencils, but I'm working in that company. So I'm caught in the problem. Me being part of a whole group of aggregate of people doing the wrong thing isn't going to fix it. So you can't be part of the collective and figure out that there's going to be a solution in there. I think we're locked.
We're having a lot of internet connectivity issues. Ethan has just messaged me and that he's frozen as well. I have not been able to stream this live to social media platforms, so there is a lot.
Can you see me?
Experience.
No.
Yes, we can see you now, Jan.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can also hear a reverb of my voice still.
Oh, okay.
As well, so I don't know whether you want to log or just turn your.
Will you log out and try it again?
I don't
I'll
know.
log out.
Maybe it just seems like it got a little worse. Maybe we could. Maybe you're better.
Do you want me to log out and try in again?
Yeah.
Do you want me to log out? Let me log out and try.
Yeah, that might catch you. Yeah, that might bring you back up with us. And Everyone, I hope that you are getting a lot from today. I imagine that you are. Obviously, we're talking exclusively about the alphabet, and we're bringing in other stories that are connected to it.
And we're bringing in other stories that are connected to it.
Dan, how's it going over there?
Laura, somehow you picked up a really bad echo.
It's going to be great now. I think that was Dan's connection.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's going to be coming back, but yeah, it's your mic trumps his sometimes. So when you interject, it goes over what he's saying, so we can't hear the rest of his sentence. And so it's I was just hearing sentences not getting complete.
Oh, okay.
I was getting just a little frustrated. So just because what you're both saying is valid and great information, it's just when it cuts off. And we're doing very well considering the nature of this conversation and the consciousness and the speed that consciousness moves at.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you bantering and sharing your perspectives, and definitely anyone else that maybe has a perspective based on what you've been hearing, please feel free to step up and share that perspective, or if you prefer writing it in the comments, then we definitely want to hear what's real for you. And I'm looking forward to hearing more of this conversation. I would say around the distinction around traveling and driving, though, is what I was going to point out, in that driver is a status, whereas you're permitted, well, not permitted because it's not a man given gift to be able to.
Well, according to the legalese, yes. But what I'm saying is, once you take all their power away and say, no, I'm not playing your word game anymore. When I say driver, it means what everybody comprehends that word to mean. It means somebody who's operating a conveyance of some sort, because to drive something is to move it. You know what I mean?
You have set out your own terms and conditions.
Exactly. And so again, I'm not saying, obviously that's why we're all here, because the study of this and their spell book, their grimoire, their grammar, which is grimoire, which is a spell book. The study of that is what really starts to open everyone's mind that this is a thing that they're doing. But here's the thing. You don't have to play their game. That's what I'm trying to tell Dan. It's like, this is all awesome. And yes, let's talk about it. Let's point it out. It's cool. It's fun. But let's stop getting trapped into tiptoeing around their bullshit. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, and we are implied to be sureties for our person until we've actually made claims in lawful notice that we then stand on as lawful claims that are submitted into the courts, that are then enforced with common law, which is just the L of the law. So recognizing the multiple jurisdictions that judges are passing judgment over us on and in, which is why common law arguments on their own don't work when you've got a judge passing judgment in the canon and contract law jurisdictions within the law that is all three in one, not just the one.
Yeah. Well, actually, a judge never actually passes judgment on you. They simply interpret the law, and they interpret what is given to them. That's why it's important to establish the fact that you're not playing their word game. Because then they have to reinterpret things in a different way. So, I'm not going to plead anything, because I'll ask you, how do you plead? I don't plead. I can't. I'm not an animal. I don't plead. I'm a living soul. I have nothing to plead. Christ has already paid for everything. And if you're playing a word game here, well, it's irrelevant. It's null and void, because I don't consent. I don't understand it. I don't speak your language. And you can't hold me accountable to a language that I don't speak or understand.
Yeah, Anna in the comments is saying, but we don't drive a motor vehicle, we operate it and steer. The motor drives it. Very clever. But it's just the notion of a status, or even the status of a beneficiary.
Right, but see, this is what I'm talking about right here. We've in this freedom movement, we've gotten so wrapped up in so much fear of their spell book that we fear the words. And we try to tiptoe around with, oh, you can't say that. Oh my God, I said this. We can't say that. It's stop already. Stop. We don't have to accept the rules of their game. We don't have to consent. They artificially applied these definitions to these words to begin with. They're not set in stone. God didn't create the definitions to these words. These are man-made languages. We can make whatever definition we want. So what I'm saying is stop acting in fear. Take your authority and say, guess what? Before we even get started, I'm putting y'all on notice that we're not playing any word games here. So when I say something, there's no trickery, there's no tomfoolery. I'm not playing games. All the definitions are already outlined in my affidavit. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. When I say something, it's what the common or uncommon, if you want to say that. But again, I feel like we're playing the game again. We're tap dancing to their bullets. It's when I speak, it's what a normal person would normally comprehend my meaning to be. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
Just don't give them that authority. You're actually giving them more authority over you by trying to tiptoe around and tap dance and play their game and use their, why are you using their spell book? Use your own.
Well, we have to create our own, and we have to
exactly
that we are the eye mages.
But I just did. When I walk in with affidavit says I'm not playing by the rules of your spell book. When I speak a word, it means what a common or uncommon, if you want to play that game, what a normal or an everyday person, whether they be an atheist or a Christian, when I speak a word, what they typically comprehend that to mean.
Well, even the word person, though, to agree to be that is to agree to be the legal fiction that.
But that's playing their game. I'm not playing their game anymore. When I say person, I mean someone like you or me. Well, of course, person means you're wearing a mask. It's a persona. But when we're in these bodies, it is a persona. So that's accurate. But I'm not going to let them subjugate my authority and my sovereignty just because I used a word and they decided to, put their little bully definitions on it. I'm not playing that game.
Well, if you know how to take your power back and actually make
you just speak it.
Claims,
that's what I'm saying. That's all I do. I just speak it.
It's part of it, but you have to have it written, or else it's not in the flesh. It's not.
No, I agree, and that's why I put it in an affidavit.
Anna, what's your question? I see your hands up. It's good to see.
Yeah, Lucas, Ethan, excuse me. You keep saying you have your affidavit. Who exactly are you giving it to?
Anybody I need to.
So what, do you walk in and hand copies out, or I'm very curious about this because an affidavit can be very powerful. But
yeah, I'm just saying, if I ever needed to give it to somebody, and I've given affidavits, I've submitted them into I've recorded them into courts for certain cases. I've given them to insurance companies. I've given them to banks. I've given them to clients. I've given them to a lot of people. You can give them to law enforcement. I have one, I haven't had to do it yet, but I have one waiting and ready for a law enforcement officer if he wants to inquire about who or what I am.
Dan?
Yeah, sorry, you're in the US, right?
Yes.
In progress.
Thank you.
Oh, there's Dan.
That was I don't know whose Alexa kind of device came in and said progress, but Dan, we got you back.
Back in. Okay. Okay. Anyways, am I on the screen?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, we see the board. Is the board clear at all?
The board is less important than you, but
okay. I love you, Laura, because I love the way you say things. Okay, because you say things so truthful and heartfelt, And that's what's going to get people through this. All I'm trying to do is remove chaos. And everybody's been caught in the chaos. So I'm not going to write an affidavit to deal with chaos. I've already got a certificate. They gave it to me. They had to give me the solution right from the beginning because I wasn't involved. The biggest thought out there is I have to change my status. I've got to do something different. It's ridiculous. They gave you the tools. The certificate would have happened for a child, right? The certificate would have been there. The child's born. He's in this system. The parents who don't know anything get all these birth records, right? They get a statement of birth record. Maybe if they're, in that system in Ontario, they get a statement of birth record that's filled out by the parents at the hospital, and then they get basically a short form birth certificate. Now, the short form birth certificate is more the evidence of what it is, because you can't use the statement of birth record. The main reason is because no child could be born a citizen of any nation. So there's no point getting into this argument, I'm going to draw an affidavit up to defy that I'm a citizen.
No, I don't define that I'm a citizen. I'm not. I'm telling them that I'm not anything that they're trying to make me.
But it'd be ridiculous to do that because I've already got something that already says that I'm not in anyways, that's got someone's signing authority on it.
They don't see it that way is what I'm
saying.
saying.
They do see it that way. You just haven't used it that way.
What do you mean?
You've never used that. If you look at, let's take very simplistic here. Sure. This is the version that's used pretty much worldwide on taking someone to the cleaners at the court. This is it. This is the certificate of debt. We can call it a bankruptcy certificate. It doesn't matter. I don't care if there was a bankruptcy in 1933 and they took everybody off the gold standard. It means nothing to me. This is what was issued. This is what you get. This is what comes in. Even if I was a child and I never applied for anything, period. This is what my parents would have handed to me to hand to the state. So it's already their issue. And their issue has their signatures on it and their seal. So I'm not in there at all. There's no point in me spinning my wheels thinking I'm an imprint. Now, if you put this on the table and you smack it with a hammer and you go, ouch, then it's you. I agree, then you need to make an affidavit to say, oh my goodness, man, you made me this. I don't see it as that. So put it this way, very simply, it comes out with a name that's on the certificate. That's the name that's on the docket. That's the name that's the derivative use on the driver's license. And in fact, you'll find that in your state that the Registrar General will tell you by letter that they never authorized the ministry or the Department of Transportation to use the birth certificate that came from the registrar from your state to issue a driver's license. They'll even tell you that. So that means they said, oh, would you like to join us in there? Give us that, and then we'll take your picture and we'll create a new derivative instrument from that. But they never said that you were authorized to do that. You just did it. That's assumption. That's basically an assumption. So the name that's on the certificate is the name that's on the docket. So if I'm John Doe, it would come out Doe, okay, basically Doe, comma, John. Okay? And that's the name that's on the certificate. But guess what? My signature is not on there.
Right.
This is the signatory for that instrument. And that's what runs the court case. They're after someone who's given them something that most of the time, more than not, how many people humbly at the side of the road said, I'm not in charge? You need to talk to the people in charge that are the signatories for the official department of the government. I'm not in charge. I have no legal rights in your system. That's it. There's nothing further to say. Hand them that. Be peaceful. Let it go from there. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to get a dumbass cop up the side of the road.
Yeah, you will.
Because he's had zillions of other dumbasses that have basically even said, I'm a sovereign. What an idiotic thing to say there. I'm a sovereign? I'm a gold coin? Or on top of it, the meaning of sovereign means that I have subjects. So how could someone be a sovereign citizen when you'd have to have subjects? Who are your subjects if you're a sovereign? It's a totally ridiculous argument point. Only a sovereign could have subjects.
I don't argue being a sovereign. I don't claim that.
No, I'm saying, but that's the general rule that's going out there by most of the people that are out there disputing what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, if I'm not the signing authority, tell them the truth. Here's I have been given this to give to you. I'm not in official capacity to talk to you. You'll need to talk to them. That's it.
All I'm
At the
saying
end of
is
the
that
day,
once
what's
you
going to
do-
happen there?
all
Now,
I'm
if I've
saying
got
is that-
property in there, right? If I've got bank accounts I opened up, if I got property, I've now worked contrary to this.
right.
Because I didn't open up the bank account with those signatories, did I?
You made new signatures.
I never opened up a bank account with those signatories. I never used their authority. They're running the money. Let them run the money. Why am I trying to operate the money? Why do I want to go and make a living out there? That's legal slavery to begin with. You're not supposed to pay to live. There's no concept between your natural life and using money to live. Not whatsoever. There's no way you can rationalize that. Just because people do it doesn't make it right. That's how we've destroyed the entire earth, is by selling our bodies as a whore for money.
Right, but in the meantime, you're living in a system where 99.9% of people operate off of that. You have to eat, you have to have shelter, you have to have clothing, minimum. So
How's that got to do with what I just showed you what I just said? What does that got to do with what I just said? You just tell them that that's basically, so did anybody stop anybody from taking this into a bank and saying, I'm going to be placing these signatures and these seals on top of it as the representation for the bank account for that name? They gave it to you.
right.
If it remained in the state and everything is owned by the state, you came in with nothing, you're going to leave with nothing.
Right.
It's only a theory you had something. So then how could I be robbed in the fiction?
I'm just saying, how do you provide for your shelter, your clothing, and your food?
I just said this. I just said it. If I was starting a bank account and I put their signature and seal on everything, who do you think is going to be paying for everything under that name?
The receiver
The
just
people responsible for the legal.
But
Not-
are they really doing that? Do you have a bank account that somebody else is signed for? They're just giving you a blank check, essentially.
It is a blank check. This is what this is. This is what it represents.
But
So
I'm
in
not saying,
reality,
is that what you're doing?
hold on. Slow it down, brother. Okay? I'm talking, when I talked to Laura, I told her, as I told most people, that this is the final stage that we're doing in the journey that we've been talking to people, doing the last when I do a 4-week seminar
Mhm.
on what you need to do so we don't deal with the static anymore. Not dealing with anything other than let's just basically use the tools we already have. And because you've been given a tool, they're the signing authority for what is legal. As Matthew Henry wrote in 1700s, when he talked about woe unto ye lawyers, for you take away the key of knowledge, he stated in there, in the warning, the lawyers own the debt of the company. The lawyers work for the evil. So they have taken a position that there is no spiritual salvation. So therefore, they're responsible for that position. Therefore, they sign for that. And that's why you only have a legal department involved in every government department, and they're basically responsible for their own responsibility to handle it. Now, if I want to go and take over someone's debt, which seems to be the problem that most people are trying to rationalize, that how is this going to work? I'm not there to make it work. There is no money in nature. So to say that I have to find a way to make that work, okay, where I take over the responsibility for it, is a completely opposite journey on truth. Truth
No, I get
doesn't
that.
work in
But let's break this down in the natural. Let's say you're out in the woods, you're by yourself. You don't need money, but you have to have.
It's not, hold on, let's step back there. We don't even want to go to that, because in the woods you're talking about is run by a state crown or a state federal service
No, I do.
that says you're not going to be in there for more than 30 days as a legal person. You can't be there for more than 30 days as a legal person in any state in the U.S. nor in Canada.
Okay,
I'm
I'm just trying to put out a hypothetical here.
That's a bad hypothetical. That's a bad hypothetical because we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with money. If we're going to talk about money,
wait, how's it a bad hypothetical? You didn't even let me finish. You don't know what I was going to say.
Okay. So.
Oh man,
this is disrespectful. I was just asking if you could answer a question based on something.
You want to work the money, and you're trying to find a way to rationalize how you have to do that to be in there. And I'm saying you're not supposed to be responsible for the money.
That's not what I was asking.
Money and spiritual don't go together.
That's not what I was asking. I'm getting at the point that if let's say there is no money system, and let's say you're out in the woods somewhere.
Where would that be right now that we're in? Where would that be where we're in right now?
Okay, I'm not even going to try to finish this because I can't build up to the point that I'm making. You're not letting me.
Are you living in a secular state that's right there? The United States is called a secular state. Canada.
I can't ask my question and make my point if you don't let me explain myself first.
Okay, so what we're gonna just do.
You just don't want to answer the question.
I'm trying
That's all it is.
You to answer the question, and you keep.
I just told you what it is. You could go to the bank and open up the bank account with a regular signing.
Is that what you
gave you the tools to do? And that's where we're going right now.
Is that what you did?
That's the direction we're going.
Is that what
we're not going to waste our time trying to find for it?
Have you opened up a bank account using just your birth certificate?
Did I just not answer that question? I said that's where we're going right now. That's what we're going to do.
But what have you done so far?
In the world of the government, where I've used their signing authority to represent a fee or a fine, they've actually discharged the debt every time.
Okay. So how do you open a bank account with the?
No, I have not.
Okay, so
no, I have not.
Okay, gentlemen, we're not talking about banks.
And I already answered that to you before.
So we can have this. I feel like this part of the conversation would be better served to be in a more structured space where we are able to focus on that rather than a what have you done and what have you done and like what everyone else has done. Like I've been doing quite a lot myself, and like I've learned about living in the land of liabilities compared to living in the land of benefit. And right now I'm figuring it out, which is why I'm not expressly speaking out loud about that. However, I do believe that we do need to understand the framework in order to be able to build off of. And so I appreciate that the what has happened and what have you done are important parts of the conversation. But it feels like there is a lot of energy that is not going to be conducive to getting to an answer everyone can benefit from in this experience. Because it feels very...
Absolutely agree with you, Laura. I'm just saying what's happened in the majority of the world that we're surrounded with, 99% of the people have a version of how they're going to still operate and stay in control of something that's unnatural. They don't realize that he who commits the tort has to bring the remedy. So the party is missing the point that the law already protects you from birth, that the signing authorities are responsible for basically invading your privacy as a child. And we've already done that in numerous, I have numerous videos on the site. So if the other party has watched any of those videos, I'm not saying he has to, I'm saying, but if he's watched them, he would realize there's a court case in Canada that stated there is no provision in the Canadian legal system for an individual to transfer their given names to anyone, whether to a person, a corporation, or a trust.
I never said that. I was just trying to find out how you recommend people operate to obtain shelter, food, and clothing. That's it.
Okay, and all I'm saying is we've done everything opposite, contrary to that in the way we've operated. We've taken the government off the bond.
I'm not asking what the opposite is. I'm asking how you do it or how you recommend people do it.
So I did it through a direction of a not-for-profit direction off the top because I found out that the government's operating a no-share capital company.
Okay.
And therefore, they don't have any money. And therefore, all the monies that are advanced to them or advance through the officials who operate the system that they operate for. So when you're elected into the public in the government, you're no longer part of the collective that's out there anymore. The only difference between what is private and public is your given name was supposed to be in there because your given name's not really part of the registration system. It never was.
I agree with that.
It never was in there. Not from day
That's
one.
still not what I'm asking. I'm asking how you recommend somebody go about obtaining shelter, food, and clothing.
Can we start right to the beginning? If we don't understand how it operates, why are we asking where's shelter and clothing going to come from if I don't understand the construct, how it operates? Would it make more sense? You're telling me you want me to do an affidavit potentially, or you're doing affidavits into the court, and I'm saying I understand that. But that's part of the construct you're already in based on the fact you're mingling two names together that don't belong.
But I don't use affidavits to obtain food to feed myself.
But that's a ridiculous thing too.
I'm not being fed by ravens like Elijah.
Okay.
Well, generally, I've also heard that if a lawyer is happy, then it's likely because it's not in the interest of the man or woman that is engaging with them, which is where affidavits come into the picture. And yes, it's the highest authority in order of getting a witness to verify something, and yet we are part of the legal fiction, which is like creating joinder to the legal fiction, because we have to drop a knee in order to even interact with the interface that allows us to work together, right?
Basically, the lawyers run what is legal. The only thing that's legal on the birth registration system, on what is designated as a name, is only the surname. So that's why I'm trying to bring my brother back to the understanding. If he doesn't go to the beginning, there's no point arguing how you're going to feed yourself or anything else, because the world you're surrounded with is based on a legal system.
I already understand.
There's no land out there that someone's not going to run into a conflict somehow, some way in the future. It'd be different if I was able to go out there and say, look, there's some crown land out there, 4 acres of it. I'm just going to take it. I'm going to put a homestead on it, and I'm not going to try to get removed off of it. That's
not where I was going with that comment. That's what I'm saying. Like, it was pointless for me to try to continue, because every time I try to make my point, you stop me.
Because you're not going back to the beginning where the registration starts, and that's what I'm trying to let you know.
About the registration. I'm asking. Let me put it this way. Do you go to the grocery store?
Talking about the name, if we're not going to talk about the registration, I don't see it.
Let me ask you one simple question. Do you ever go to the grocery store to get food?
That's not the method that you're going to be doing when you're doing what we're about to embark on.
I'm asking you how you do, like, in any time in the past, have you gone to the grocery store?
That has nothing to do with what we're going in the present about to do. Has nothing to do with it.
What did you do for dinner?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm going to just...
You're caught in the past. You're not going forward. You're thinking about something that I want to stay in the wrong. And I'm not staying there. And I'm going to explain to you how the construct even happens with the government. Do you understand why the government runs not-for-profit organizations? Do you have an answer for that? You seem very arrogant that you think you know.
No,
so please.
I understand that. I'm just asking how you.
Brother, why does the government run not-for-profit organizations? Do you know why? Do you have any idea?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please explain it.
After you answer my question.
No, I'm asking you this, and I'll go and
answer my question, because you're going to say I have to spend money to get groceries at the grocery store.
Listen, I'm asking you, you're like asking me, how do I buy a Tim Hortons coffee when I'm in the wrong side of going about to obtain it?
But do you do that? That's what I'm asking you.
Okay, let's go back to what I just said.
Very gifted.
Okay? In my life, I stopped charging for anything I did, unlike some other people that may be laughing with a glass in front of them right now. I stopped charging for any services I did when I woke up to this in 2007. So if anything, I walked like the apostles. I was gifted. I wasn't charging for services.
So
because the apostles,
people gift
hey, listen, stop for a second. Stop for a second. We were talking about the Bible earlier. Let me just answer
really,
it.
wait, can we just like take a breather? If I like, I'm a woman of Christ, okay? And I kind of hear two people who've been quoting scripture and who are supposed to be men of Yahuwah. So can we just like address each other
still draw the line.
love?
They still draw the line. Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple.
Jesus threw the money changers out. Pays for coffee or gets a meal or has a place to stay, because people in our society, unfortunately, it requires an exchange of something. That's all I'm asking.
We're jumping into the middle of the pool of the legal, and we're not going to get anywhere on this conversation.
I agree.
We're in the middle.
And right now,
I think it's pretty simple to answer. I know how I do it. I use fiat currency.
That's great. And therefore, you're under the direction of fiat currency. Who issues it?
Okay.
But how do you do it? I'm asking you how you do it.
Well, hold on a second. You just said you use fiat currency. So if I buy Bitcoin with fiat currency, then fiat currency controls the Bitcoin. People try to outwit the fiat currency with the Bitcoin. If you're using fiat currency, everything that you purchase is owned by the fiat currency. Very simple.
Dan. I know that, Dan. I'm just asking how.
Okay, so if it owns it, then what's the controversy? Be happy that the fiat currency owns it.
I'm not denying that. I'm just asking how you do it personally. That's all I'm asking.
I was trying to explain the fact of how we would go right back to the beginning to understand what it is, and we're dropping right into the middle of the pool. We're in the middle of the pool of this, and there's no way this is going to work. I know it. Because you think where you're at right now makes sense, but if I'm in a construct where I said I'm compromising to use the fiat currency, and it's okay. Everybody's
don't ever use fiat currency.
I know I don't own anything that's involved with it. I have no ownership whatsoever. Nothing. Absolutely zero.
Okay. But you don't use fiat currency at all.
If fiat currency, if it was in use, it wouldn't matter anyways, because where the direction is going to go with this, the fiat currency owns the debt.
I understand that. But I'm
so
just
I
saying,
don't.
if you want to get a meal somewhere or a cup of coffee or whatever, don't you?
You're jumping. That's where we say. That's where the jump goes. You're jumping. You're leaping to the next realm. And I just said, if you were. Oh my goodness.
You're evading my question. It's because I have a feeling
freaking lost.
You have to use fiat
You're
currency.
lost.
You don't want to say that you do.
Ethan, I'm just.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, we're gonna just stop right now because this is not actually moving anyone's awareness forward. Spiritual warfare is definitely present, and we're experiencing that right now. So we've all got our own stuff. We've got solutions we're trying to find collectively, and so this originally was meant to be about spelling.
Yeah, Dylan didn't go there. It's okay. It's not your fault.
And so we're not going to go down the direction that this has been going to, just because that's not what we came here for. Dan is actually putting together a workshop to go back to the beginning. It's 4 2-hour workshops from my understanding, and just getting more information to be able to help people understand how to create nonprofit trusts, to be able, or personages, or I'm not sure the specifics yet, because that's something to be able to get into. But if we get into the point of the conversation Ethan is trying to go to at this point, people drown because they try to do things they're not ready for. So we need to just step back, and we just need to be safe, because we're the leaders that people are watching. And so when our egos get in there, then it just knocks everything down. And I'm not saying that as a projection in any way. I'm just saying everyone that has come here with an open heart, hopefully an open mind as well. And when we have space to be filled, then we can be enriched and also enrich others also. So what I would like us to do is go back to the stem and the alphabet focus, and if we could speak into more towards what the beginning looks like, that would be an incredibly valuable place for us to understand where to go off from here.
I'm with you. If we're going to go back to that, it's the beginning of the challenge. As I tell people, whether they're going to believe the Bible is literal or they're going to take it in a figurative, it's hard to teach when you run into a problem where some people are saying the whole body of this scripture is all basically figurative and not in a reality of a situation that actually occurred historically. But if you take it both literal and figurative, both situations work out, because there's really no problem there, because there's a figurative to the real, and the real works with the figurative or the symbolic. So when you're looking at the book of you're looking at the book of Job, and it's an interesting book. Is one of the most ancient historical books in the Bible. Out of all the research of times and dates of what they think this book was written, the book of Job tends to be the most ancient out of all of them. Now, in the book of Job, there was a challenge there made by a fallen angel that we would have known later as Lucifer or Satan, who challenged God, saying that his creation, his physical creation, Job, would never serve him unless he had material reward. So he said, take away all the good things that you've given him and see that he'll not spit in your face. So it's interesting that the definition of Job in English, for going to English, it is defined as official public business for private dishonest gain. Okay, so when we look at the etymology of a name in our society, your given name is something your parents give you. It's not legal. A given name, at the best sense, is private property. Okay? So that's private. That doesn't belong to the state. And then we get this legal surname that shows up, which there is so much research on this that it's too much to show in one video, okay, or teaching session, that will tell you that these were assigned for the purpose of commerce. The census, the tax, the draft for war. Now, if I'm saying official public business, the official, when we're talking about public was tax. So these were there for tax reasons. So if we're taking official public business, official public tax for private dishonest gain, it would be something that doesn't belong in there, that's utilizing it for its own gain. So if my given name is involved in the public assigned surname for its own private gain, that's official public business for private dishonest gain. And that's called a job. And a job is theft. Also another meaning of the name job. Even though we may call it Job, translated out of Hebrew, we're dealing with an English transliterated alphabet, okay, that is trying to combine up and by chance leads to this, which is so uncanny, that the whole thing about the test of Job is, would you serve your fellow man only for gain and monetary reward, material reward, or do you serve him also for love? Is it going to be for love, or is it for the love of money that you're going to serve your fellow man? So the commerce world works on the love of money, not the love of your fellow man. There is no interaction between the two, and we've had thousands of years of proof of this, that it's never led to anything but bad. It's led to destruction of the earth, all its sources of essentials that have been polluted, destroyed, and put into the level we see today. So the evidence is on the court docket that we know that money has not been a good thing. And so I'm not going to try to play into that scenario of the money because I know it doesn't work. It's never worked for spiritual good. It's worked only for destruction, and it's been happening by such a large collective mass that it's almost like it's an unstoppable thing. It needs a divine intervention to stop it, because it'll take the last tree out of the rainforest. There'll be nothing left. It would sell the last living resource for an idea of gain. And so you can't be part of a collective that has that energy, okay, without experiencing the energy that comes from that collective. And trying to fix a collective that believes that 51% of the vote is going to make something good, if that's democracy, if 51% of the vote says something's okay, we're going to do it, what happens with the other percentage that knows that something is morally wrong, but the legal state is going to pass it in legislation to say it's okay? It doesn't mean that legal makes something good. It just is based on how many people with a conscience or no conscience are going to vote on something. So we're in that very scene on what this is, and that's what it is involved in the name. So when Christ said you cannot serve God and mammon, he was saying you can't. Mammon was a Syriac word for gain, by the way. Okay, so even though it was represented in Greek as the god Mammon, where they coined Mammon in Canada, follows the Roman version of the goddess of money, which was the Romans had the goddess Juno, in whom they coined money. So they worshipped that, and that's what people serve. If they say, I go to work for money because they receive money for the day, then they're working for the money. Even though they may be working to use the money for a necessity, the bottom line is they have to use the money to get there. So it becomes a problem because it's an unnatural concept. It doesn't occur in nature. God did not create money. There is no natural source of money anywhere in the world. And if someone wants to read a really good, expose, there was a individual that was interviewed by a radio host who basically has a transcript on the net, and it was called The Man Who Quit Money. Someone even wrote a book on this guy. Funny enough, a guy went out and made money on a book, based on a book that was written about a guy who quit money. The Man Who Quit Money, and someone out there and made money on him and wrote a book on it. How absurd is that?
Well, it's kind of like the personal growth industry of all of the coaches that are working with people about how to, like abundance coaches that are working with people to get abundant, that are teaching people how to be abundant when they're not abundant, because they're going to get their abundance from the one that invests in them to learn how to become abundant. And it's just like there's a lot of frauds and trickery that are involved in the stories, in the way that we transact with one another generally, the way we engage with one another. And I'm bringing this up because I don't know how long you've got tonight, Dan, and I know that you've been on here for an hour and a half tonight. And Ethan, I see you commented and you'd mentioned Jesus had a job. He was a carpenter. And Jesus told people to sell their coats and buy a sword, which I see to be the sacred word of the right use of both our spoken word and our written word in the pen that we wield. But using money was the comment, and then still wanting the answer about Dan's private life. So that's a conversation I feel like would be well served to maybe have a conversation and we can figure things out, because everybody wants to know what everybody's doing, and ultimately sometimes we can get so stuck on the evidence piece that we are missing the beauty that we have to contribute and someone else does too. So I'm just trying to acknowledge the fact that I asked both of you and everyone else to join. Be respectful.
Well, put it this way, Laura. You know what really it is. when we talk about the not-for-profits, they're public. They're public trusts, okay? So the government operates in the same thing. They're a public trust in the structure. I'm not saying there isn't corruption in there. I'm not going to get into that because a lot of charities have corruption involved in them. And there's people driving around Mercedes and monies that came from people taking from what would have been labor. But remember, all the money is issued out of the public. So the reason for the public trusts are to bring the money back into the public. So when they run the lotteries, all they're doing is getting back money. It's a very sophisticated yet very simple strategy. Why don't you offer a lottery, bait all the non-taxpayers who are trying not to pay tax to go and stick their hidden money that they don't want to report, and they'll go and put the money into a lottery system. So they take the private money they're hiding that belongs to the Bank of Canada. If we're in Canada, in the United States, they have their, they have their greenback or whatever is going on there. And that money is basically collected back into all these state or provincial lotteries, and it goes back into the public coffer. So it goes back to the public treasury because they basically, the only way they can get people to do it is based on enticing them to bring the money that they took out of the system, because they don't realize they were using a title, a legal assigned surname, for the purposes of not realizing that was only for the state. That name does not belong to them. So you can't belong to a membership. Just like if I say, if I'm a Canadian, then you say you belong to Canada. Well, then Canada has to be your focus. So then you're working for Canada, and Canada says, hey, what are you doing with that money that's supposed to go to the Canadian public collective? So the best thing I can do is tax you to death, because the majority of the participants are spending their time hiding the money and not putting it into the public collective. So what's happened is they didn't realize how the legal participation works. And because they decided to misinterpret the use of the certificates they were issued, they used it improperly. And therefore, I'm going to take your picture, Laura, or I'm going to take some kind of form of ID off of you if you're going to use that certificate down a direction that is not for the public gain. So I need a dog collar control on you to find out what you do with the use of the money that is not yours because you don't issue it. So it's kind of like I'm in someone else's sandbox. I'm a member. I'm in the truth part myself, and then I enter into the sandbox of fiction with the legal system, with the legal surname. And once I enter into that, and then I deem myself to be, or I conduct myself to be a legal citizen participant, then I'm responsible to respond back to the legal citizenry. Without that, there'd be chaos. So there could only be two sides. Now, you can't force someone to work for money because that would be legal slavery. It's pretty simple. If you said to me tomorrow, by the way, you need to go to work to earn money to pay for something, well, that's legal slavery. You need my consent to do that. Now, whether or not the scheme of the legal tender game of secular state operates that way, you could never have been born into that, because that's contract law. And because legal citizenship is contract law, you could never have been born a citizen. So there could only be two positions. Either I'm going to be a consensual participant, where I'm going to place my position to take on the surety of the state title, last name, in order to be deemed a legal citizen participant, or I'm going to say, hey, no, I'm going to use your signature and seal that was on the certificate that brought me into that before I had age of consent to make a decision. And because it's fiction, it's fraud, and there's no statute of limitations on fraud, which means there's no time limit of when I wake up to know this. Unlike the normal statute of limitations, which is for recovering monetary debt, and you only have 10 years in Canada. It's 10 years on average per province. I don't know what it is in the US, but you'd be crap out of luck by the time you were 10 years old. Okay, so by the time it really started, Or if I look at 10 years after I hit age of election at 18, that would be roughly 10 years after that, which is 28. Okay, 21, maybe in some places, which would be 31. That's the limit I have if I want to recover back. I believe that I've been induced into a fraud. Okay, but there would be a real problem on that because you were never part of the state to begin with. That's why you're always requesting documents from a source that has nothing to do with you. In nature, you never request anything. So in essence, let it be what it is and let the tortfeasor just handle their own nonsense because they're responsible to take care of their own debt. And because you were never born a debtor, that's an impossibility. You couldn't have entered in a debt as a minor. And because a surname means a debtor in legal context, then there's no point walking around there arguing about what I'm going to do with my life with anything, no matter what I want to write. The minute I put down that last name, I just said I'm a debtor. So, and because the origin of those legal surnames come from legal nations, not from spiritual. They have nothing to do with tribes or family. What people think it's their bloodline. It has nothing to do with it. Even the term family used in English leads back to the Roman meaning, which means stock, which meant you were the stock of a legal Roman civil term family name from the master all the way down to the lowest servant or the slave in that household. It had nothing to do with the meaning of some bloodline or tribe. Period. That's it. And in fact, tribes were never part of the international law of nations, ever in the historical idea of world powers or nations. So whether it was the nation of Israel with the 12 tribes of Israel or it was the native tribes, they were never part of it. So when Jesus said, my kingdom is no part of that world, he was telling the truth because he was never part of it.
So the original job was in having us come to believe that we were converted and perverted from being a woman or man into a person or some other status that would have us drop the knee as to our ability to stand fully as we are, to then take on the title. Like when the knight receives his title, he has to drop the knee and then submit to the king, who is able to then direct where the knight goes and how he uses that title on behalf of the king.
And even the knight, he went down on one knee, not on two. So he was half to God and half to the legal crown. So he was a double agent. Welcome to the Knights Templar.
Ding, ding, ding. Amazing.
You couldn't trust them. They were in darkness. That's why they have knight in the name. Okay? So it's unfortunate that what happens, we all woke up in this, but when you look at the word to deceive, it means to induce someone to believe that something which is false is true. Legal fiction is the assumption of the law that something which is false is true. So when you enter into the fiction, what was once false is now become a truth because you've merged the two together based on your position. Because you can't run something like this without having somebody induced to believe. You will have no workers on it. So yes, I would be part of something if we pulled the plug. It's like war. If you want to stop a war, then yes, the hippies should have stayed down on the ground when they said, hell no, we won't go, and should have stayed sitting. But no, they got back up. They just got back into another war, which was commerce, because those same hippies got involved and they did worse things than their parents they were blaming prior were involved in something that they thought was World War I and World War II. But World War means commerce war. So the whole idea of commerce is war. It has nothing to do with anything but power and war. It has nothing to do that there was really something going on. It was the control of the commerce. So all they did was they sent people out and they balanced out the public interest in the health. And public health says, let's lower the amount of people. The public health means tax health. Doesn't mean natural. So let's eliminate the people that we basically have that own property from pulling a job on the state, using their given name to use the state surname and try to hold it up in a bank account. So what we'll do is we'll eliminate the certificates we issue that they said they were surety for, and we'll cancel them once they get killed in war. So what easier way to do it is to jab them all anyway, shoot them all with a commercial idea, which you can find in Black's Law. It's defined as a feigned disease. Look up feigned disease in Black's Law 4th, because the word fictio means to feign. And then Peter, in the time of Jesus, he said that they will make merchandise out of you by feigned words. And a surname is a feigned word. It is a commercial word. It is a name added to one's real name based on its definition. So in Canada, we even have a dictionary that even states that. It says surname, a name added to one's real name. Well, then that's not real. So then I'm operating in fiction with a fictitious name. So why would I even argue about it? If someone created a fictitious name and induced me to use it, let them pay for it. And that's why they had to sign the certificates. They're Federal Reserve agents. They're the godmother and godfather on the birth certificates. That's why the male is always the registrar general and the female is always a deputy. They have a female and a male on all those certificates. They're even following the Catholic Church ritual on godmother and godfather, which means gossip, which also means hearsay. Because it's only hearsay that you have that name. Because it's only used for commerce, because it's not real, it's not truth. Gossip is not truth, it's hearsay. They've got a system in place, so if I don't start there, there's no point asking, how am I going to survive, when I don't start at the beginning where it all starts. So if I got them at the beginning, well, I've got them on a certificate, and I can't go to an officer and tell him who I am. Laura, if you pulled me over as a provincial police officer doing your job, right? And you get pulled over, you pull me over, and I hand you this. I said, well, I've just given you the truth because I'm not the signing authority. Never was, never could be. Now, if you bring me into a court, there was no picture on this, so don't ask for a picture. Get the picture? And if there was a picture on this, wouldn't that be child pornography? Because that would be the naked truth.
Yeah.
So it all begins here. There's no point arguing about being in the middle of the rapid river of commerce and saying, how am I going to buy that Tim Hortons coffee, or how am I going to buy that property? They gave you the certificate. It's their responsibility. They represent the legal construct. They're the signing authorities. We're not. We never were.
So with the nonprofit trust and the workshop that you're wanting to take people through to be able to actually,
We call that the training wheels.
Okay, get the training wheels. How does that lead off from here for people to be able to go on that journey? Okay, well, not-for-profits, being public trusts, have to take money from the for-profit thieves corporations to exist. So what they're doing is they're drawing the money back out of the for-profit gain. The thieves who are using it for using basically all their enterprises for a gain, a profit, and it pulls it back into the public. Because the minute the money comes out of that, what we call that private sector, the money goes back into the public. And when it goes into the public, it's back into the public treasury. Because that's like the public body. We'll call it like a body with hemoglobin. It's got blood money in it. But what's happening is the private side who wants to steal from it, who thinks that I'm being robbed by the state, right?
Well, I'm not worried about them robbing me because basically they're sponsoring with their signatories on this. But in the normal realm that we would operate, which we understand, where people, when I say normal, and it's not normal, I'm just saying the normal construct of people participating that are using this the wrong way, those not-for-profit guidelines that run not-for-profits state clearly in the objectives, no gain for the directors. So even though they may be trying to use that public legal last name for their own gain, if they do so, they're violating the actual mandate or the objectives of what a not-for-profit is warned not to be involved in. So a not-for-profit, being a no-share capital corporation, it's not like IBM or Ford or General Motors, it has no share. So in other words, it's got public money in it. It's receiving money from the thieves. So it's like the Robin Hood, going in there to steal from the sheriff of not. Because they're not supposed to be profiting in there, so they're supposed to be putting it back into the not-for-profit. So Robin Hood goes in there as the not-for-profit to draw the money back in. And that brings and balances the bookkeeping better because their system is not designed for gain. It's actually working contrary. So people would say, Dan, you're talking about legal communism. Well, not the way people have seen legal communism, because of the fact there's corruption operating these very things. But the training wheels would tell you in structure that if a not-for-profit is bringing for-profit money that should be in the public side to look after food banks, homeless people, all the things that are necessary, it's doing what Jesus was talking about. He wasn't selling fish, he was giving fish. So if someone says Jesus was involved in commerce, that's full of basically nonsense from what you read in Scripture, because Jesus took the men that were operating in commerce, took them out of it, and pulled them into what he was doing and said, come follow me. So they were leaving already what would have been considered commercial enterprises and leaving him to follow him as apostles. So they were not out there. There's no evidence of any of those apostles, okay, basically in anything. There's the odd situation where it showed that Paul, and people don't know about Paul, but Paul being the 13th apostle, he wasn't part of the original 12. He was apostle of the Gentiles, but his unique position was he was freeborn. He was of nobility of the Roman Empire. So he already had tax-free land. He would have what we would think about being a loto title. He was part of the nobility. And that's why he was in such attack when he went down the journey he did. And why he talks in language that Peter said, Paul is very hard to understand. He never said Paul was a heretic. He said Paul was hard to understand because Paul was not only a Roman citizen, he was a Pharisee, a Talmudic Jew, and he was also basically now a gospel preacher following Jesus Christ. So he had a knowledge from all three sectors, and he was writing in that manner. And when he talked about things, he even talked about a strawmanus homo, a straw man. When he said, what concorded agreement does Christ have with Belial? And Belial in Hebrew meant a worthless man. In the Roman Empire, which adopted many cultures, they came up with that same concept and called that a strawmanus homo, a man of no means, a guy you could buy for money. As long as you offered him money, he would sell himself out. Well, I think we're pretty much in that right now in the worldwide sector of the straw man. A man that will sell out his spirituality for some money. It's just a matter of how much he receives. He's always for sale. And that's called a legal prostitute. That's why a hireling means a prostitute, and the word idolater means hired servant wages. So how do you break away from the etymology and the source of these words, which we've been talking about, which is based on the letters? So when we're just dealing with, plain, just looking at the straightforward how people would reach a research on a word, I could go through 20 volumes of the Oxford Dictionary to show you what each word means. and say it's not what you've been taught. Then I can take you back to 1755 Samuel Johnson's dictionary and explain what you were taught is not what that word means. Their word pension in 1755 meant payment given to a state hireling for treason to their country. How many pension funds are there out there right now? Did the word change? Or are we just more treasonous against the state? And we don't understand how the state operates. Maybe we shouldn't have been using the state name for our own gain. Maybe we are treasonous, and that's why the pension funds are going to fail. Because if you've got your signature down on it versus the state signature, well, who do you think the money would stay under if you use their seal? It would remain in the public. Those are public seals. They're not private seals, they're public seals. But we didn't want to give our labor up to the collective, right? So we said, oh, I'm not going to serve my fellow man for, without reward. I want to pull a job. So that's why I relate to that. And I knew I was going to get some very serious, offensive resistance. And, as I say, I came from a very, very strong Protestant pastor, preacher, father who didn't understand what I'm talking about right now. He went to his grave not knowing this. But I'll tell you one thing he said was, you don't sit on the fence between truth and what is a lie. If it's a fiction, it's a fiction. If it's truth, it's a truth, though he didn't understand what was going on in the very name that he used. If he had known what this was, he wouldn't be sitting on the fence. So what happens when you sit on the fence, you just take the offense notice. Because you most likely took it personally. You took something that belongs to the state and said it's mine, and I'll pay for it. So that's taking it personally, which is taking offense, and that's why they do what they do. There's no way around anything that I've experienced out there in it. That's why I detoxed off of this system from around the year 2007. But prior to 2007, from 1994 to 2007, I was in the world just operating what I believed was a better moral direction, which was not-for-profit organizations to help the greater good of the public. And then I eventually got to this knowledge and said, it's got to relate to something because it relates to scriptures like Matthew 6:24, which says you cannot serve God and mammon, which is the word gain. We can put the word mammon in a Greek, but the actual word they derived it from was the Syriac word for gain. And gain meant profit. And everybody wants profit. And so your given name is one thing, but the surname, that's an addition. That's positive law. That's gain, because positive is gain.
With the nonprofit trust that would be getting set up, that would be changing our name to make that the person that is used, or our person that's converted into.
What it is it becomes like once you get a name that's used in that world, it's set up so that it goes and removes money from the profiteers and brings it in to the public trust, and those public trusts, which are legal persons in law, are tax-free because they're public legal persons. They're not private people using a public last name. They're designed so that the directors are under heavy scrutiny, that they're not to even take a payroll out of there. Everything operates under that legal public person. That means everything from anything they purchase to everything remains in the public. So what happens? It's owned by the public. So why would the public trust that's operating within the legal, why would it tax itself? Because it already owns it. There's no share capital. You can't sell it for a for-profit gain because charities and not-for-profits are not saleable. You can't sell them to anybody. They're literally tax-free persons because the state already owns them, in theory. So why would I tax shelter you to not pay tax if it wasn't already the property of the public legal state? It's already theirs. So you're registering something into the public. Your surname is already a public entity. Your given name is a trespasser in there. It's like a stowaway on a legal ship. It's using something that it's not entitled to, but it claims entitlement to it. And they say, no problem. Would you like to claim entitlement to it? We have a nice little scheme. It's called fee simple. We simply charge you a fee for everything you do with the use of it. And that's how we operate property under that schematic. We even have 25-year life sentence mortgages for that. For people who like to own the property and they want to go into a 25-year life sentence mortgage, renewable every 5 years, for being interested in something that's not theirs. Now, you can always chase the carrot, but you're always going to get the fee.
This question it strikes me funny, but not. But so should we all take slaves now because the Bible says so?
Well, I mean, what you're really doing is you're actually, like I said, you're almost like the Robin Hood doing the public trust to take it out of, because it literally draws out of the private profitable sector and brings it back into public use. So if in theory, everybody was operating a not-for-profit, it would destroy commercial corporation gain. If there was enough of them out there, but there's not, because there's way more for-profit companies out there than there'll ever be not-for-profits. So it's kind of like a losing battle, but it's a good training wheels to understand why the state doesn't tax it as a person in law, because it's already a public personage. It's an artificial public person. And because it's public, the state doesn't tax something that's already theirs, because it's got no ability to be sold for gain. It's strictly in the public sector. It's not in the private sector at all. And so if directors decide to take payrolls out of it or do something that looks like they're going to try to do a greed thing, use it for something, well, then they're going to get taxed on it. But everything that is owned by a public trust is in the public, which is a good training wheel for what it is, because your given name was never involved anyways, because you were never supposed to be in the birth registration. That's where the problem came in. Were you going to eat from the forbidden fruit? So your parents already involved in eating from the forbidden fruit were already going to enter your given name in there, basically training you to do the same thing they did, which was to take your private name and claim the public last name, which is official public business for private dishonest gain. Welcome to pulling a job, which is robbery. They also call peculation, which is the public and using it for your own gain.
We're getting choppy there.
So, I don't know how much of this is sunk through, but I didn't want people jumping already into how do I participate in something that's already in the problem and then figure out what do I do from there. Because the problem is we're not supposed to be in there. And so if everything was under the public, which is the solution that's coming, which you're going to see, that's what we've been doing these seminars on. Not so much this is like a little piece delving into it, but we start from the beginning and then we go through stages on it so that you're ready, you understand it. So that when you get to the stage 4, you understand what's going on. There's no unclarity in your mind how you got from A to Z. But there's no point talking about when I'm in B, C, D, and E when I didn't even understand how I started at A. So if I don't understand the A, let's not talk about being B, because B is already a worker letter. That's why they have the A and the B side of a company. One's the B side, that's the common shares, and the A side is the preferred shares.
Well,
so you want to be preferred or common?
Well, definitely preferred. Especially after.
Right now they're getting rid of the commoners, and they're showing it right now. So you know, I mean, it's terrible what's seen out there, but I mean, these people believe they're actually even on a spiritual mission, thinning out the herd of the dummies. Because they define a dummy as one, that's a given name, who holds legal title for another. Black's Law 4 says a dummy is one who holds legal title for another. Another is a stranger. So your given name is truth, the surname is fiction, so truth is a stranger to fiction. So one who holds title for another is a dummy. So it's someone with truth holding on to a fictitious title, joining himself in there for gain, and thinking he's going to make that work, but he's actually playing the dummy.
Yeah, it's an intense that our lives are on the line, or our lives are on the line for. So we need to understand this, and that's why I appreciate you each for showing up tonight. It is actually 7 after 11. So we have been together for more than 2 hours now, and it's been enriching, and I would love for comments, feedback. I love the comments that are coming in, and so definitely print off the or save the conversation there, and I'll put some of the quotes and pieces that are in there into the replay when I post this onto YouTube. And I will say that we are going to have another Mind Control Programming and Propaganda Summit on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, if you can make it for that.
Yep.
It's going to be the 4th one, so having your perspective amidst the others, the focus of it will be on the Mental Health Act and the other
Right.
that we're made to be dumb and unable to speak for.
Well, that's perfect, because if anybody actually has a chance to research the Osborne's Law Dictionary, that is an English law dictionary, it'll even define that the fact that the word patient was originally under basically the lunatic definition prior to being a patient. So when you're in their system, you're already deemed to be institutionalized, because they say an insane individual doesn't know the difference between truth and fiction, right and wrong. So if we don't know the difference, then we remain in an institutionalized system until we break free of that. But at the same time, you know, the system has to have relief, okay, because of the fact how it operates, because it operates in a legal manner. And unfortunately, it does induce the use of someone to come into it. So it has to have something that doesn't belong to it, something that's private, brought onto the original record that the parents fill out. And because the parents are not in a proper state of mind, they're going to do the very thing and train their child to do the same thing they did. So this is a big gambling game, but at the end of the day, the certificates hold, and those seals hold, and those signatures hold to what it is. We've just started to think that somehow they're going to see us in some natural state signing, and we're just a monkey wrench that basically takes on the debt. We just said, hey, no problem, give me the debt, I'll sign for it. I'll take on something that I don't operate. I'm going to learn 4 million laws and statutes. I'm going to sign to all that. And so if it all begins there, the name that's always on the docket, it's going to look like this. It's not going to be based on my imagination being dragged in there. And if I don't believe I'm this, why am I showing up to the court? There's people out in Kitchener, Ontario, that actually had the audacity to make T-shirts, Laura, that said they are not the person. And I said, if you're not the person, then what are you doing there? Why would you show up to the court to be not the person? That's a ridiculous concept. If I knocked on your door and I'm looking for someone else and you said I'm not the person, would you be showing up to try to pay that bill?
Unless you were sure.
So they are insane. And they need to be institutionalized. That's what you do with people that are nuts. You institutionalize them.
And we're all implied.
Because I'm not going to show up the court on something. Now, it's different if you brought me in there under force and duress and dragged me in there. Now we have a whole different ball game, because basically the word equity, which is conscience and fairness, will not support a volunteer. So if you're going into the court talking about the name that's on the docket and you're showing up in there with something saying that that's not what you are, they're going, hold on, we're not here for someone who says they're not that. We're here for someone who is that, and we're looking to collect. So they would have to have something in evidence that said you're part of that or you've taken on the surety for that. And that's why they're waiting. And if you don't show up, no problem, because they got a billing address where to send the bill to. And then you surely will be ill for getting short with God's will. Will I am.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and so I want to round up tonight, and Ethan, I want to also respect the fact that you come and added value, and there's questions that you have, and maybe there's an opportunity for after the call, maybe we could have a private conversation or get some private questions answered, because I appreciate, Ethan, you're wanting in the comments you're asking, he wants to know about your private way of being able to receive money and funds to operate in this world. There's the part of me that says, well, how is that anyone's business other than himself? It says, you know, how do you make your money? And anybody asking that, it's like, you know, there's a lot to all of that. So I appreciate your wanting answers and feeling evasion is happening, which I would just more so say, like, I wouldn't, it's nobody's business how I.
You know, the best way to say it, Laura, is that in the way that I'm talking and what I've already shared, I don't have any private life in the public realm. So it's all public. That's why I'm talking about the public trust as the training wheels. And that's why I'm saying that when you're done, if you've got the signing authority and the seal of the public authority, then everything stays public. So there'd be no need for a legal will for someone who came into the world without anything. You would leave with nothing anyways, in real essence and straightforward observance. Someone came in with nothing, they leave with nothing, unless you came in with a wallet and a bank account, okay, and a birth certificate tattooed on your butt. You don't have it. You never had it to begin with. So the whole theory about having a legal will, that's the scam of the lawyers, because they want you to believe in something that's fictitious so that you'll pay for it. My son said to me when he was 8 years old, and I was going down a research journey on this, that's way back, because now he's well over 25, and I said to him, basically in simplicity, I said, what's up? And he comes into the room and he says, Dad, the government makes everything look so real, you buy it. So what he was saying is there's such a good scam on making a fiction look real that you buy into it. So people actually believe that the names they operate on are theirs. If you talk to the average individual on the street, they'll believe that that last name, that legal last name, is theirs. And there's no evidence of it. But they keep showing up into the court trying to claim it. What a huge scam. So there's no point talking about me showing up to a court unless I've taken a bill to believe that that's me. But if you said it was me, I've got a document that says I don't sign for it.
Helping people understand how to advocate for themselves in the way that we're all trying to say is the big piece that is really needed for people to be able to know how to take next steps. So to actually be able to step into the nonprofit trust arena and understand how to create a trust that we can actually have. I would say power or with, not it even either. It's like land of benefits, land of liability. How are we going to walk the line?
Well, that's even why the legal public sector, that's why they they actually put the categories in place for every sector. So there's some places that are food banks, others that will deal with the homeless. They'll have different, some deal with the environment. But what I'm trying to say is they're trying to literally somewhat buffer a disastrous world that's gone on thus far. And they know that if it wasn't for these public trusts, these legal trusts, there would be no possible way to buffer out or try to control the profiteers out there. So they literally connect with those for-profit entities based on, oh, I'm going to advertise with you because you're doing such a good thing. But all they're doing is these profiteers who don't pay tax will sponsor money into not-for-profits, not because they really believe that they're going to fix something. It's because they get advertising dollars out of it. They literally associate with them for that purpose. So some of the biggest not-for-profits are beside the biggest companies that support them. You won't find many small little grassroots not-for-profits. They would be dealing with people they know or associated with them around the neighborhood they live in. Those are how those, so there's a little bit more purity in that end. But overall, it is still doing the same thing. It's taking money out of the private sector and putting it back into the public body. So the blood money in the public body has a better blood flow. It has lots more hemoglobin when the blood money's flowing through it. But when the private side takes it out of there, they're bleeding it, and that's why it's always complaining, where's the money for food banks and for the homeless and for all these needy causes, because they never have enough in there because the profiteers don't want to give up their profit. So they find ways to scheme, scam, and hide it. And you're not going to fix that world, but at least in the schematic understanding, you can see the two and why there's a need for it, because it'd be far worse without those not-for-profits. I'll tell you that right now. If you didn't have the food banks, you didn't have the homeless shelters, it'd be far worse out there.
We definitely need to come together in community and common unity and remember how to care about one another and connect even when there are. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Ethan, was there anything that you wanted to put forward before we get
No, I'm good. I just sent you a private message because I'm not going to be talked over. So
I'm sorry that was the experience. I'm sorry. Yeah, I appreciate each of you for sharing your perspectives and trying, and if we can maybe have a conversation that could help bridge a gap that obviously we've fallen into tonight, that would be immensely helpful for healing the collective energies, because if it's in us, in our small group of us in view and not, it's definitely a reflection of a larger pattern. So if I can be of service in that way, I would be glad to, and if not, then we carry on and we find what resonates and who resonates, and we go with that, and hopefully we can find a way to be inclusive of people that have good hearts, because I know we all do. And I appreciate each of everyone for being here. And so I appreciate, yeah, that's all I got to say tonight. It was a long one and an insightful one. I definitely am leaving full. And is there anything anybody else would like to add in? If you unmute your microphone, then I'll know that you do. Dan and Ethan, I'll definitely reach out to you after, and would love to connect. And yeah, peace, love, light to everyone. I appreciate you, and yeah, we'll end our call tonight. But Dan, we'll get more information together about the workshop series, and then creating some practical solutions to really guide people on a process that will help better understand the nuances that we fall into if we don't know what to expect, is going to be really useful. And so I appreciate all of it tonight. I asked. Okay. Yeah. Well, Thank you. Anything, Dan, you wanted to say?
Like I said, it's there's troubled times coming, and whether it seems like I'm being abrasive. If you know someone was warning some of you of something, I'm just telling you right now that no one owns anything in this country, nor any other country out there in the legal concept, and you won't in the system that we're already normally participating in. So if we don't reverse that, but you have to have a way to function, and that's why we went down this understanding that if you don't understand how even the enemy operates, you're not going to understand how it works. And so most of the knowledge that's out there is just based on independent, I'm going to do this way, I'm going to do it that way, but it's got nothing to do with actually how the structure operates. And so if you don't take it from the beginning, you're not going to understand it through. If you never had signing authority from the beginning, how all of a sudden are you going to have signing authority all of a sudden? Did anybody knock on anybody's door and said, welcome to being a legal participant? No, we just kind of walked into it. And so it's an unfortunate reality, but that is the truth of it. And anything in between that is just part of the chaos. And that's why there's been so much philosophy and things involved in people, putting up what they believe was going to be the new thing that was going to fix everything, in the legal theory, and it's not going to work. And that's been the basis of the sovereignty free man movements.
Well, we definitely need to talk about the status of sovereign in the next one as well, because that term comes with a lot of definitions and distinctions that people are not aware of that ultimately do really change when we actually know what the definitions are. So we'll get into that more next time. Thank you to everyone, and we'll see you on Friday at 2:00, hopefully. And just looking at the sustenance of the men and women serving the not-for-profit is part of the operational costs. Chuck was saying, I'm trying to catch up on the context of that comment. I'm not sure about, Chuck was addressing you, Ethan, on that one, so I don't know. Yeah. Well, it's been an interesting one. Would love the feedback anyway. And
That's just how I see it at the moment.
That's how you see it at the moment?
Well, I'm looking into it all, so.
Okay. Well, definitely please do keep us posted, and appreciate your feedback, and very curious about the nonprofit. So I'm really looking forward to these workshop series. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Laura. Okay. Take care. All right. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.